Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. We have officially reached the playoffs. Looking forward to breaking down the Saturday and Sunday games. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Andrew Laird on Friday mornings. If you could please rate and review the podcast, that'd be fantastic. Goes a long way towards helping people find the podcast, which is also a very good thing. Andrew, we made it through 17 weeks. We made it to the playoffs. Looking forward to this. I always like the playoff, both the playoff podcast and playoff DFS in general. So I'm looking forward to it. How are you?
I'm good. Value, obviously, a little tougher when all of the good teams are in. So what was your thought on the split slates here? So we have 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, instead of what we used to only be 2 and 2, right? So we have a 4-game weekend slate. Gamer.
Yeah, and you and I talked about it during the week, so we're going to attack this as like 2 different mini slates. The big DFS tournaments are like there's a Saturday one, there's a Sunday one. There are some crossover ones, but they're much, much smaller, as you pointed out to me. So I think you're right. I think we're going to attack this as 2 different slates. We'll do Saturday 3-gamer first, do Sunday 3-gamer second. So we'll kind of do it like it's going to be like multiple Thanksgiving slates, I suppose. But, obviously the information we're talking about, the guys we like, don't like, goes with the full slate too. And if you want to play that one, all the stuff we're talking about still kind of, carries over, although a little bit differently because obviously you're, when you're comparing guys in 3-game slate versus 6-game slate, there's a little difference. But at least the player stuff will be the same. But I didn't like it. I like the 6-game. I like the whole weekend. So I used to love the 4-game weekend slate on playoff weekends, Wildcard and divisional. I imagine they'll do the same thing next week. Although with 2-game slates, maybe they'll mix it up a little bit. But I used to love the 4-game slate. Like you do well on Saturday, you're like excited for Sunday, or you do badly on Saturday, you can kind of go with some low percentage like late swap guys on Sunday. But I would have preferred the whole weekend. But got to deal with what they give us.
I think given how there was like initial uproar when they got rid of the Sunday night game for their Sunday main slates, and then all of a sudden we played like one slate and everyone's like, oh, this is so much better. Like I think that's a valid point. Yeah. As much as we like bigger slates, I think the majority of people like faster ones. And this isn't even like a fast slate either. I mean, this is a complete of the day slate.
Yeah. Like you're gonna on the West Coast, we start at 10 in the morning. Game not gonna be over till 9 at night. I mean, that's what 11 hours of football. Like that's great, but you're right. It's not an especially quick moving slate.
Right. So I mean, not that like there's usually significant like lineup issues. There are no late scratches usually in the NFL like we see in the NBA.
Yeah, especially in playoff games. Like, right. I think, you're going to get guys are going to play. Guys are going to play.
Yeah, and usually guys who are questionable, like the news comes out fairly early that we know what's going to happen. So, I think the 3 games is fine. Like two game slates are a bummer, but I think 3 is okay. Like I think they will probably. I'm not sure if they'll go with a 4-game slate next week, but
my guess is they go 2 and 2.
2 and 2.
I think so. I think they did. I think they moved to that a little bit last year, and I think I was upset about it last year too. And I imagine they'll move even more to it this year. Would be my guess.
Right, or just 6 showdowns or something like that.
There you go.
Forget it.
Every quarter a big game. So let's jump in. I'm gonna go game by game on Saturday, just kind of let everybody know who's playing, what the spreads are, all that kind of stuff. We have 3 games on Saturday. We have Indianapolis, Buffalo in the morning, which is the highest over/under of the Saturday slate. Buffalo, hottest team in the league. One line in the last 10. The only game they lost was the Hail Murray play that they lost right at the end. Averaging 35 points a game in the last 10 games in that stretch. Over/under is 51. Buffalo implied total is the highest of the day. It's 29.5. Indy is kind of right in the middle. It's 4th at 22.5. Crazy. The Colts have only been underdogs in 1 game this season. I was shocked by that. They were, and that was a 1-point underdog week 5 at Cleveland. So a little bit of nice scheduling for Indy, but I was surprised they were favored at Tennessee. They were favored at Pittsburgh, but that was, I think it was the game that Pittsburgh had been like awful 3 games in a row or whatever it was. And then Pittsburgh actually beat them in the second half. But I was surprised. This is only the second time Indy's been an underdog all year, and by far the biggest too.
Yeah, that is surprising. I don't know what to make of that other than maybe they're. Yeah, that's a lot of games to be favored.
Their schedule worked out really darn well is kind of what it turns out.
I guess
it's still amazing to me they lost to Jacksonville week 1.
It's that is
Jacksonville didn't win again, and they're Indy's in the playoffs, so it's wild how
it's a weird
week
season.
Week one in football, just remember that is just kind of makes no sense overall. But Yeah, I think that's the most fun game probably of the Saturday slate. It's the game that we're expecting those points. We've got two other games that are pretty low totals. So this is, I think the game a lot of people are going to stack. It's the morning game too, so like you probably know how a lot of teams did by 1 o'clock, by lunchtime, but on the West Coast at least. Then we got the 1 o'clock game. We have the Rams at Seattle. Seattle -3, over under 42.5. Which if I told you the start of the year the Rams and Seattle had a 42.5 over, you would have told me I was crazy.
Yep.
But it's amazing how these teams have looked different in the second half. Seattle's implied total is 23.75. Rams is 19.25, so they are the second lowest on the slate in the implied totals. Seattle's interesting because they're awesome at home in the playoffs. They're 6-0 under Pete Carroll in the playoffs, but that's with fans. Like it's just I don't know how different it's going to be. The Rams don't have to travel very far. You don't have that crazy fandemonium going there, but I mean, Seattle first half, second half, we've talked a bunch of times. Seattle first home games, first 8 games, 34.3 points per game. Last 8 games, 23.1 points per game. And they clearly made a shift in how they were doing stuff. It makes no sense to me. I obviously watched the game last week. They played the 49ers, and they scored, 3 or 6 points the first 3 quarters. And I'm like, they look awful. I'm like, oh, they're down 10. They have 2 drives left. They're going to score 2 touchdowns and unleash Russell. And exactly what they did. And it's like so obvious, and they could have done it more of the game. I mean, the Niners defense played hard and is pretty good and ended up the season pretty good, but I don't know. It seems weird to what they're doing. I get it. They're trying to keep the defense off the field and run the clock and all that, but they're literally stopping themselves from scoring more points, which seems a little backwards to me.
Yeah, it did seem like the solution to their defensive issues was let's just run the ball so that they don't have to be on the field. And that seems like the wrong way to go. And based on the results, you'd think that they would go back to it, but go back to throwing. But we just haven't seen any evidence that they want to do that.
We haven't, and the Rams are struggling on offense too. And obviously, the big note in this game is that Jared Goff is still questionable. He has that dislocated right thumb. They had surgery on. Didn't play last week. John Wolford played and kind of looked good running the ball, getting out of the pocket, but the passing was not very impressive. He didn't look good early. Looked better in the second half.
Yeah.
I give him that. I was kind of impressed with what I saw in the second half for a first career start. But the Rams have topped 30 points once since week 6. So this is an offense that I think we kind of automatically go into auto mode oh, look at all the weapons, and they score a lot of points, and Sean McVay, and they haven't been the last 10 weeks.
Yeah, and that obviously hurts the receivers that we got so used to playing throughout the season. So, and then the running back situation is always a bit weird, although it seems to be clearing up. But how much can you rely on that if they can't throw the ball?
It's very fair. It's a game that weirdly is expected to be low scoring. Both defense. I mean, the Rams defense is great. The Seahawks defense is. I think we can take away the worst defense in the league label we had early on in the year. They're playing pretty well now. They added some pieces. I think that some Carlos Dunlap and Snacks Harris, and they added a couple guys that really changed the defense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, nobody would be surprised if this was a low. If it ended up being the lowest scoring game as it's expected to be.
Yeah, and then the last game, we got 5 o'clock. We got your buddy Tom Brady in prime time, which is no shock, even though they are playing at Washington, the under 500 team. Tampa Bay favored by 8.5 on the road, which is pretty wild. Over under 45.5. There's only been 3 teams in the history of the playoffs that have been more than a touchdown underdog at home in the playoffs ever.
Jeez. I'm guessing they also didn't go 7-9 though.
The great part is both of them won outright.
Ooh.
Seahawks in 2010, that was the Beastquake game where Marshawn Lynch beat the Saints. And then Denver 2011 at home against the Steelers. That was the Tim Tebow walk-off overtime game. So there have been 2.
We're not going to call that the Demaryius Thomas walk-off? It's a Tim Tebow walk-off?
I think it's the Tim Tebow walk-off. Crazy, though. There's only – great, it makes sense because in the NFL, the good teams are at home and the good records are at home. This is a weird one where you've got a team that's really good and playing well, and with Tom Brady coming into a team that's under 500. The Seahawks that year, I think, were exactly 500. It was the NFC West was really bad that year. But wild, though, that it happened twice and both teams won outright.
Of every team left in the playoffs, how would you rate the football team in terms of pressuring the quarterback?
Yeah, right up there. I mean, that's the one thing they do. And, Chase Young is already out there. I want Brady. I'm looking forward to facing the GOAT. And he got some heat for that. But I'm like, well, I think, as a competitor, you want it, let's go. You don't control who you play anyway. So let's go do it. But, I'm looking at the teams here. Probably the third best maybe behind the Rams and Pittsburgh. If I'm just kind of eyeballing it, maybe the Saints. But they can pressure the quarterback. I mean,
I don't even mean just overall defense, like just specifically getting to the quarterback. Like
yeah, I mean, they were 6th in the NFL in pressure rate in the season. So you take out some of the playoff teams, they're definitely a better one, and that's where Brady struggles. So it's going to be a really interesting to see if Tampa Bay can keep him clean in the pocket.
Yeah, I think yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, I say that and he'll go 425-4, but
of course.
If he gets his jersey a little dirty, then
all we've got to do is play him, and it's guaranteed that he'll be 175-1. So we're good. It's a weird this slate's weird. I found so many more playable options in the Sunday slate. Like this is the harder slate where you got to make a couple big decisions on like obvious guys where you're gonna play them or not. But there are a lot more plays in the second slate. But it makes this one interesting. I mean, 3 games, you got a lot of guys to look at, but I found a lot more guys like, I want to play this guy in the second slate by far.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think generally that's just kind of a reaction to the fact that those games are going to be higher scoring, or at least expected to be. And so, I mean, the easiest path for GPP differentiation is just ignoring the Buffalo-Indianapolis game.
Right.
But you're like...
And then if it's 38-35, you just go do something else.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, you got Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You got Sunday. So let's jump in. We got we'll start running backs on the Saturday slate. The first guy to talk about, and it kind of decides what you do with the rest of your lineup, is Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. He's 7,900. I think the next highest that I really looked at is like 5,900.
Yeah.
It's a huge drop, and he's not even that expensive. So if you want to play him, he's not that hard to get in. I guess they are 6.5 point underdogs, so it's not a great game script for a running back. But, I mean, he's always been on fire. He had 253 yards rushing last week and 2 touchdowns. We talked about a bunch last week, and he delivered fully. But what do you do with Taylor this week? Is it like an automatic play? Is it like you want to get away from him? What are you thinking in terms of, obviously the highest owned guy, pretty significant at the running back position? Yeah,
I think there are ways to not play him. You obviously need to fill 2 running back spots, and I think you can get away with some of the cheaper guys. It's just a matter of I think you're essentially comparing depending on what kind of contest you're playing. Like in cash games, do you think he's more reliable than Stephon Diggs? Diggs is the most expensive wide receiver. We'll get to that in a little bit, but they're basically the same price. And so fitting in both of them and a quarterback that you probably want is, makes it a little barbellish, as some people say. But
look at that. What a term.
Do you think Taylor is do you think the Colts are going to really run him early with the hope that that's how they establish the game? Or do you think that Phillip Rivers can pass over them?
I mean, I think the hope is that, we'd run Taylor and keep Josh Allen off the field would be the game plan. Right. But, I mean, Josh Allen's been unbelievable. I mean, he's been so hot that I don't think they're going to be able to really slow him down. And I think the Taylor thing comes down to game script. If they're down 14 early, it completely changes what Indy has to do. I mean, they don't go away from it fully, but he's a guy that they want to hand the ball off to when they get to the passing game. They want to go to Naheem Hines, and it's just one of those things that they'd love to use Taylor, but in the second half, you have to hope that Indy's within a touchdown. Otherwise, he could get game shift out for a little bit, and that's scary with the guy who's the most expensive and kind of most owned guy on the slate.
Right, but
if they have a lead and you don't have him, you're probably dead too. So there's it's a pretty because the other running backs available are not especially great. If Taylor does well, you don't have him. It's you're probably buried early.
Yeah, we have the benefit of having basically no interest, at least in cash games, of the running back from the biggest favorite. Nobody's going to get Zach Moss and Devin Singletary and be like, this is... And
I don't even, I see the low percent. I don't even really have an interest in them in DFS or
in tournaments.
In GPP. But, you can play them if you want to be totally different. But, they just don't... They split the ball too. They split the carries too much. If you wanted to play one, I'd play Moss because it's a pretty vast difference between the inside the 5 carries between the two of them. That's kind of the reason I would break them down like that. But then you look at the fact that if it depends if they're trailing or they're ahead and what they're doing. If they're ahead, they're probably not throwing the ball that much to Singletary. So I'd probably go Moss, but I'd play the guys in the other games. I think over both of them.
Yeah. So now you're so do I want to spend $2,000 more? And that's not to say that you want the second highest running back either.
Right.
But do I want to spend up for for a running back on basically a touchdown underdog?
Yep.
Who could lose all of his work in the passing game?
but is clearly the best talented, most talented running back on the slate. The guy who has the most. I mean, in the last 6 weeks, he has 837 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, he's been massive, and they've been running him perfectly. And he's top 80 rush yards in 5 or 6 games. Like, everything lines up well. I think it's just kind of a game theory thing, whether you want to try and fade him or not. It really depends to me on how you have to break down this game and how you think this game goes, and you decide what you want to do with him. Because if you think Buffalo blows them out, like, I think you very much stay away from him at the high ownership.
If you think they blow them out, though, do you go to Hines or do you just ignore it?
For sure, Hines.
Like, for sure, Hines over the other guys?
Well, if I'm not playing Taylor, Hines is one of my 2.
Okay.
Because if I'm not playing Taylor, I think they're losing, and then I love the fact that Hines is going to get 10 dump offs.
Right.
Yeah, I think it works that if you don't play Taylor, you play Hines. It's kind of the way that I looked at it when I decided what I was doing.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, you can fully not play either one if you want. I just think that if you don't play Taylor, it's for a reason, and that reason really slants towards Nyheim Hines at the price.
Right. Yes, I agree.
I think he's a pretty talented player. If he's going to touch the ball a bunch of times out of the backfield, I like him at the price. If
you think the Colts win, then obviously you go right to Taylor.
Right to Taylor. And he's not 9,500 either. He's 7,900. Like, you could do a lot with him still. If you think the Colts are in the game in the fourth quarter or win, I think you just play Taylor and you fill in the rest of your lineup around him.
Yeah. The difficulty is that, like, if the Colts win, and it's because of Taylor, you want Taylor, but then you also theoretically want the run back, and running it back with Allen and Diggs, like, that's not cheap.
Right, and that's assuming you think it's going to be like a really high scoring back and forth. Like, I think that if the Colts win, they're probably trying to win 24-21. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and they could be in a shootout, and who knows? Phillip Rivers has got some old guile left in him. But yeah, you're right. The run back does get pretty expensive pretty quickly there.
Yeah,
that's why you go Josh Allen, John Brown.
I love John.
Spoiler alert. That's coming.
Totally.
But let's hit into the other running backs. Obviously, we got 2 slates here. We don't get stuck on one guy. But the next guy down is at 5,900 is Chris Carson. He is clear. He's off the injury list, which is good news. And good script there. Good game script. They're a home favorite. I mean, not huge, like a 3.5-point favorite. Just hasn't had a heavy workload. He's been the last 5 weeks. He got 16, 15, 17, 19, 13 touches. Like, not bad and consistent, which is good, but not heavy. They haven't been leaning on him. I wonder if they unleash him in the playoffs or not. Obviously, I don't know the answer to that, but you wonder if they have a lead. It's a playoff game. They're not worried about kind of holding back on him. He's their best running back. Carlos Hyde's been pretty decent, but I think it's pretty clear that Carson, when he's going, is their best guy. Didn't do much against the Rams a couple weeks ago in Week 16 for 39 and 3 catches. The Rams' run D is obviously good. They're 3.9 yards per carry. Everything they do on defense is pretty good. But I kind of like Chris Carson this week. If you think Seattle gets up, I think they feed him more than we're used to.
The most frustrating thing about the Seahawks not throwing as much is that it hasn't resulted in huge gains for Carson. Like, what are we doing?
It hasn't resulted in points. So like, there's just been nobody. It's been wild. Like, Tyler Lockett goes off once every 6-7 weeks, and like even DK Metcalf hasn't been great the last 7-8 weeks. It's been weird.
I think the way that you described it is more of a leap of faith with Pete Carroll than
I do too. I just seems to make sense, and I probably shouldn't do that with Pete Carroll.
Right, because sense would be just continuing to throw the ball all season because it's worked.
It would, 100%. So you're right. I've taken a leap of faith with Pete Carroll, which is dangerous for sure.
I think Carson's a great GPP play. I don't play him in cash though.
So the guys below him, we got Ronald Jones at 5,500, Antonio Gibson 5,700. You got Cam Akers, who you were talking about earlier, at 5,100. Do you like these 3 guys at all? What are you feeling with this group?
I think Jones and Akers are the guys. Like, I think Gibson, who's like still banged up.
I'm not playing Gibson against Tampa Bay.
Right.
If he was 4,500 maybe, but 5,700 with the other guys, I'm just not doing it all.
Right. And I think just the way that we've been discussing it is how you end up with Jones and Akers. Like, Jones is the starting running back for a touchdown favorite, or no, 8. What was it? 8.5.
8.5.
8.5. Obviously,
like has been pretty darn good all year when he's played too. I hate what they do with Fournette.
I was just about to say, like,
he played 30 snaps last week and he had 27 total yards. Like,
yeah.
And Jones was 12 for 78 on 36 snaps. Like, you would like to think that Bruce Arians is like, oh, I clearly have a different a different level of players between the two guys.
Yeah.
I think Ronald Jones is significantly more talented and a better player, but the snap splitting has got to come into play when you decide what to do with Jones.
I actually don't think it on this slate. I don't think it matters. I think Jones gets enough that. I mean, you're basically comparing Jones like potential.
That's a good point.
Potential split backfield, and when we say split, it's like still 3-1, 4-1. Like it's not 50-50. But it's still a heavy favorite. It's just it checks all the boxes that you want. He's cheap.
And the point about the slate is important too, because usually I'm like, I just have Ronald Jones. I've got 13 games. I can find somebody else that's not splitting carries or not splitting snaps. But you're right. There's 3 games here, and we've just discussed how there aren't a ton of running back options on this slate.
Right. And Akers, while being awful last week, still had 21 carries.
34 yards. Oof.
Yeah. That sounds like Leonard Fournette.
It does. 4 catches, 52 yards is just promising, though. I like the fact that he caught the ball in the backfield, especially if Wolford plays, gives a little bit of a data point that maybe he does dump down a little bit.
Yep. Or they just give it to hand it off because they don't want because you might as well just keep running the ball. So I think they're going to be the popular combo.
Yeah, and he's clearly the guy there. Like the fact that he came back from the ankle sprain and Darrell Henderson had 4 touches or whatever it was. Like he got 25, 29 touches. Like it's clearly right now that he's the guy no matter what in that backfield.
Yeah. So I think really the consideration is less do you want to skip one or both of Jones and Akers for Taylor and Carson, and more how much do you want to rely on J.D. McKissic and Nyheim Hines? And
both in games that like they are significant underdogs, and like they're the way they use them lines up perfectly.
Yeah, they could have 25 targets combined.
You say that joking, but like if they both get behind, that's actually possible.
Yeah.
I mean, J.D. McKissic has 28 targets the last 3 games.
It's just
and this is a game they're going to get behind. Tampa Bay stops the run, but allows a league high 6 catches per game to running back. So it's like, and that makes sense because they're ahead in games and they can't stop the run, so teams start to jump off a little bit. But I mean, I think I like both these guys. I think that you're not going to play both of them because it's probably a little bit too much. But there's going to be a lot of laps. So I play at least one of these guys. I think.
Do you think like? How many lineups do you think people have both? Like none, right?
Yeah, not a lot. I think it's hard. You can get up the salary that way, but I just don't think you need to play 2 cheap guys to get there this week because they're just not. It's not a big enough slate where you could play Devontae Adams and someone else or something like that. Lamar Jackson, whatever it is. Yeah, I think a lot of people go down to one of them. I think that the other guys are close enough. Like Jones and Akers are right there. Where like you look at it, you're like, I want to play J.D. McKissic over Cam Akers, and just like name brand recognizing and all that kind of stuff. I don't think there'd be a lot of lineups with both these guys.
I think the other difference is that Akers is getting work.
Yes,
regardless of game script.
100. I agree, 100%. Yeah.
Jones probably. Yeah.
They'd have to get behind to start dumping, and
right.
They could get behind to Washington. Stranger things happen, but I think it's safe to say that they're going to be in that game no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so I mean, obviously, it's the game script that's expected based on the total and the spread, but like you need the right game script for McKissic and more Hines. I think McKissic is much more reliable than Hines, but I don't know. I don't see myself playing either of those guys. I think it's Jones and Akers, and you just go from there.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have some McKissic-Hines lineup, not together, but like some tossed in there. I think I like Hines a little bit more, just kind of from a talent. Like we're looking for a ceiling guy in a game like this. And I think he's a guy that could, if he gets the pass, it could really go off. Whereas McKissic is like you're hoping for 9 catches for the PPR stuff, and then he really does well. But like I think the big game is where you can get from Nyheim Hines. If they get behind this game, he can make a lot of plays in the passing game.
Do you think any of the ones below are even worth looking at?
I don't. Do you?
Certainly not in cash. I mean,
it's a 3-game slate in the playoffs. Like someone could have a 6-yard touchdown, but nobody that I'm considering playing down here. And the thing with Hines, I just want to go back to Hines real quick. They were way behind Tennessee week 12, and he had 10 targets in that game. Like it's just the most recent game where they were a bunch behind and trailing. He was very involved in the passing game. He has 12 targets the last couple of weeks. I think he's the guy that if you think Buffalo really gets out to a lead and plays really well like they have been the last 2.5 months, I think Hines is the best play down here in terms of if you think that game script goes that way.
Okay. I like it.
I think he's talented. I think that
Yeah.
if he's catching the ball, he's a guy you want to have in your lineup. He's catching a bunch of passes, and if you're going to go away from Taylor, I think you do it because you go down to Hines and then find the money elsewhere.
Yeah, what's going to be super frustrating is that the combo is actually going to be Zach Moss and Hines, because Moss has 3 1-yard touchdowns.
Right. It's possible if you think the game works out that way. But
yeah.
Let's jump into quarterbacks. This is a weird quarterback slate because we've got Wolford and Goff. Who's happening there? We've got Phillip Rivers, who I don't think people want to play. Alex Smith or Taylor Heineke. Like, we don't even know if Smith's going to play. He's questionable. I think he will, but he's still technically questionable. So it kind of takes us down to 3 quarterbacks, like, off the bat. And I mean, you want to play Phil Rivers, fine, but like, I'm probably not doing it. You've got Josh Allen, Tom Brady, and Russell Wilson. Allen's 7,500 on DraftKings, Brady 6,900, Wilson down to 6,600. We've talked about the struggle with that offense in the second half. Russ has not topped 265 yards the last 8 weeks, which is like, if I told you that 2 months ago, it would sound Russell Wilson got hurt. Like, that would be the only way to work it out, right? I think everybody's gonna play Allen or Brady, and I don't think it's that hard to get them in. I think they're gonna be very, very popular, the two of them.
I think you're giving Brady and Russ too much credit.
I think it's just all Allen.
I think the legitimate conversation is, why don't I play Allen?
I haven't found an answer to that question.
Right.
The reason you don't is because you're in a tournament. You're trying to be different.
Yes.
You hope they run the ball, and you hope that Brady goes off against Washington. The way or Russell Wilson. The reason you do it is because you're trying not to.
Right. So, like,
just take it down the talent and the points, you play Allen.
So the Wilson argument is like, it's a low total. They're not throwing the ball anymore, and he's playing the best secondary in the NFL.
It lines up as badly as possible.
Right. And Brady has an easier matchup, but Washington's very good. We talked about, they can pressure the quarterback where he struggles. I think Brady at least has a case. But if you I don't think you play Brady and Ronald Jones. So if you're locked into Jones, then frankly, if you play Jones, then you have the money for Allen. Like, they're just way too many paths. Like, it would have been much better if Allen was 9,500, but it's 75. It's just like, everyone is going to play him.
You know what's crazy with Josh Allen? You know how many 300-yard passing games he had coming into the season total in his career?
2.
0.
Yeah,
he had 8 this year.
Yeah,
you talk about a guy who took not only a step up, but a gigantic leap up. Like, this is a different player than it was. I mean, he had some moments in the last couple of years, and they made the playoffs. I think they made the playoffs last year, and he had some moments. He was running the ball, and he had some stuff, but he is a completely different quarterback this year. It's been pretty awesome to watch.
Yeah, Scott Pianowski got called out this week by somebody who found a tweet of his from the end of last season where he basically was like, we haven't seen it with Allen. Which quarterbacks after the 2 seasons improve as much, improve. Right. So why should we be optimistic? Everyone's like, oh, look how wrong you were. And it's like, find anyone who saw this season coming and credit them. Like, going back and finding tweets of people who are literally just reacting to 2 horrific seasons.
Yeah, I'm sure I've got plenty of Josh Allen can't throw the ball near his receiver tweets. I'm sure they're there, but he's a different guy. The accuracy has totally changed. The arm strength, he always could throw the ball, out of the stadium, but he's a completely different guy. It's been fun to watch. And finished the season, Hughes, multiple touchdowns last 8 games, 300+ yards passing in 3 of 5. He has 8 rushing touchdowns also. He's just been awesome. The way you said it was the best. You're either just playing him or you're trying to, be creative and find a way not to because you think you just want to be different.
Yeah. Adding Stephon Diggs might have a role.
Yeah, that obviously helped a lot.
It's weird how that happens.
Yeah, exactly. You got a stud wide receiver that certainly helps, but yeah, I agree with you. I guess that maybe if you think that Indy rolls over them, you play Taylor and you go away from Allen, but I think that if they're trailing, you definitely would want Josh Allen if they're trailing, and I think he's far and away the best guy in the slate.
Where would you have fallen on Goff if he was fully healthy?
I don't think Goff's good, so not very well.
Okay.
How much is he? They obviously priced him.
6,000.
Yeah. I'd certainly find the money up to Brady, and I'd try and find the money up to Allen. If you wanted to play a game stack where you think, nobody's playing this game and I just want to get there, maybe, but Seattle defense has improved enough, and I just don't like what I've seen from Goff like the last I guess the second half of the season mostly.
So would you have played Wilson over him?
Yeah, I'd play Wilson over him. And we're just purely playing a talent. Like he's got the good receivers. He's super talented. Like it's a terrible setup with the defense and the way they're calling games right now. But yeah, I'd play Wilson over Goff for sure.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, Goff is banged up anyway, so.
Yeah, we got 3 games. I don't think I'm going to John Wolford or Alex Smith. Like I get people will do that in a 3-game slate to be different, but I just don't think I'm not going there.
Yeah, I assume the cheapest people go is Rivers.
I think so too. And he's 5,400, and he's just kind of like the floor is fine, but there's just so limited ceiling. He was over 20 points like 3 times. He was quarterback 20 on the season. Like he was just fine. I get it if they get behind, he's going to have to throw a lot more than he does. He's got some interesting weapons at receiver, but the Bills' pass D was really good in the second half. 5.8 YPA the last 7 games. Like it's just not a spot with 3 games that I really want to take Rivers.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, cash is tough, but for GPP, I think it's kind of interesting, especially if people like if you're playing we've talked about this like numerous times throughout the season. Like if there's like a clear team that you can target for GPP purposes in terms of, they're an underdog or whatever. Most people are going to go to like their first offensive route. So like, because everybody's, if you're like, I think the Colts are going to win, everybody's going to go to Taylor.
Right.
So if everybody's going to go to Taylor, just go to Rivers and stack them with, Pittman and Hilton or whatever. And there's enough. You
can come back with Diggs super easily at that point too. So yeah, I mean that's a slate. That's a stack that could work if you think that Buffalo gets up and maybe runs the ball a bunch second half. You can see if Rivers throws the ball 45 times, like suddenly that floor starts to sneak up a little bit.
Right.
So.
Right.
Let's jump into receivers, and you mentioned Diggs. Diggs is the top guy in the slate, 7,700. Led the NFL in receptions and in yards. He's always been good, but like this is a pretty significant breakout season. He was like a 4th or 5th round pick in draft, so everybody's like, oh, I always loved Stephon Diggs. Well, he wasn't that loved because he wasn't. There were like 20 wide receivers drafted before him, but he is questionable. He has no oblique. I don't think there's any way that he sits out this game if he can. Like he's just a guy that I don't think you're going to keep off the field. 7+ catches the last 8 games of the year. Everything's been fantastic. The Colts have allowed multiple touchdowns to wide receivers the last 3 games. Like it all lines up as long as Diggs is out there and healthy that he's clearly the best wide receiver play on paper.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's another reason why people pay down at running back and don't play Taylor, because if you want Allen and Diggs, then you're going to have to find some values elsewhere. But
I mean, the Allen Diggs stack is going to be on so many lineups.
Right.
It's going to be
right.
I mean, it's just the way this slate comes out. There's not a ton of plays and stacks that look that good, and I think a lot of people are just going to put those 2 in and then figure out the lineup around it.
Yeah, we obviously mentioned John Brown, who is much cheaper.
I like John Brown.
I think the conversation about John Brown is just like how much Buffalo do you want, and I don't think that's too much.
I don't either. I think that I agree there too. Now, the tough parts of wide receiver this week are the Buccaneers and the Seahawks on this slate. Like you're trying to figure out which guys to play. I think that Mike Evans' injury status is super important for this slate. Like if he plays, it makes the Tampa Bay receivers even more difficult to figure out. I think if he doesn't play, then you can play Godwin or Antonio Brown and kind of feel pretty good that they're going to get a lot of targets. Like I think that you take that one big piece out, it just totally changes, what Godwin and Brown look like to me. He's questionable. He partially practiced Thursday. They have the advantage of, maybe they can win this game without him kind of thing. Whereas most people's like, we got to get our best guy out there. You can see where they could do it. That's dangerous to do in the playoffs. I get that. But, they got to make sure that Evans is like the knee injury looked scary when he did it last week. He dropped that pass in the end zone. You're like, oh, he's done. And the fact that he's even partially practicing is pretty amazing to me. And then you got Metcalf and Lockett. Like Metcalf's been the guy all year. Lockett is the guy that has like the huge, massive games out of nowhere. He had a huge game last week. It was the game against the Niners last week was very weird. Metcalf had 9 targets and caught 3 balls. That's obvious on Wilson because Metcalf wasn't dropping passes really. He does in the past, but he didn't any of that. Lockett had the 2 touchdowns. What do you do with these 2 teams? Like the Buccaneers and Seahawks, I think figuring out the right guy here is obviously huge.
I think even if he's playing, like even if he's active, I think you can play the slate as if Evans is not playing.
All right. You think if he's active, he's a decoy, kind of not 100%, and you don't want to pay for him anyway?
I think the conversation is less about whether you want to play Evans and more like what Evans does to your decision about playing Godwin and Brown.
Okay.
That injury was so gross. Like, I am astonished that has not been ruled out for next season. Like,
I thought he tore his ACL. Like I was non-contact the way he slipped. I thought he was. I was like, that sucks. He's done. He had just got to 1,000 yards. Too, like got all his bonuses and stuff. And you're like, oh, it sucked. But great news that he's not. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I don't think you play him. Obviously, there's some GPP leverage there for people because I think most people will be scared off of it. Because Diggs has such, I don't want to say it's a great matchup, but like because Diggs' matchup is better, I think more people will look at Godwin at 7,000 and just say, I'll just find the 700 to get to Diggs, especially when I can only pay 61 for Brown. Like I think Brown will end up being the most popular one, and at least of the Tampa Bay guys.
Okay.
Lockett being more expensive than Metcalf on DraftKings is odd to me. I'll put it that way. It's one of those things that like what was it, a 4 touchdown game? Is that how many he had? He had
two 3 touchdown games.
2 3 touchdown games. All right.
And a 2 touchdown. He had 8 of his 10 touchdowns in 3 games.
It was right. It was the 3 touchdowns and 200 yards.
And one of them was in week 17, which like for fantasy leagues, like a lot of people didn't even count. So it's wild.
Right. So somebody posted something the other day about how I think PPR points Lockett finished like 0.2 of a point behind Metcalf per game.
It's 273.3 to 265.4. So yeah, that's probably about right.
About that, yeah.
Like a half point a game, maybe. Like
right.
Crazy that they ended up that close, considering where it was like even like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Right. And that of course includes 2 touchdowns in this garbage week 17. Like so, I just don't see how. I mean, I see the reason you take Lockett because he has this absurd upside. Not that like Metcalf doesn't. Yeah. But Metcalf's just obviously the more reliable. But
Jalen Ramsey doesn't really shadow, so I don't think you can really play it as like he probably won't guard Lockett as much because Lockett will be in the slot and move around. But
the whole defense is good.
The Rams allowed 100-yard receiver all year.
Yeah.
Do you know who it was? My boy.
Jamison Crowder? Oh no.
Not a good call. Deebo Samuel, 133 yards in week 12, but like this defense is really good. Like they rush the quarterback and they play good in the secondary, play well in the secondary. Sorry, but it's DK Metcalf. Like the targets are still there. 8, 6, 8, 9 the last 5 weeks. He hasn't topped 80 yards. I don't know. I'm playing Metcalf over Lockett this week myself.
That's how I would look at it. But I think you'd rather play Diggs and Godwin or Diggs and Brown. Like I think it's just not a wide receiver I need to pay up for in that game.
Yeah, and I think that the Godwin Brown point's interesting. I think I agree with you there. I think the people are going to just move to Brown because he's $900 cheaper,
right?
Which makes Godwin pretty interesting to me. Like I think that if you're going to get what I would call the best receiver on this team, he was huge last week. It wasn't, Brown had 14 targets, but Godwin had 130 yards and 2 touchdowns also, only 7 targets.
7. I mean,
7. It's just so I don't know why they don't. Everybody on Twitter is like, "Oh my God, throw the ball to Godwin. He's so good," and it just doesn't happen. But I think you're right. I think that everybody will go $900 cheaper and just see Brown and kind of go there pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean,
can you play Terry McLaurin in this game? Didn't look healthy to me last week, but had 8 targets, had a touchdown, 7 catches. He had the high ankle sprain. Paid 51 snaps. Like I think that didn't look healthy to me, but I think it's safe to say maybe another week later they're going to use him a lot. I guess is what I'm saying. Like I think that whether he's 100% or not, he's going to be out there playing a lot. If you think the game script works out as everybody does, they ain't running the ball against Tampa Bay, and they're going to throw the ball a ton. I don't know, best receiver, most talented guy on a team that has got to throw the ball a lot, at least lines up game script wise.
That all makes sense. Yes.
Last week with his first touchdown within the red zone all season long.
What a waste.
He only had 4 receiving touchdowns all year. It's just it's a shame. Like, and you see these big splash plays, and like he's so talented, but the quarterback situation's rough.
Yeah, I think like for single entry stuff, like or not single, but like low entry tournaments, I think most people are just going to ignore them. I'll be one of them.
What do you do with the Rams guys? Robert Woods is 6,200. Obviously been a little quiet down the stretch, mostly due to quarterback play, I think, more than anything. And then Cooper Kupp, 6,000. He's back practicing after he was on the COVID list. I almost always go to Woods over Kupp, just kind of consistency and targets. And I don't know. I like Robert Woods a lot. Didn't do very much at all in the 2 games against Seattle. He had like 33 and 48 yards. I don't know. Quarterback play is just so hard to figure out here.
Do you feel differently if we know Goff is playing?
Probably, because I think you get those easy, quick dump off, quick completions that Woods gets, the 10-yard plays, and I like that with Goff. I don't like Goff, but I like that with Woods. But yeah, probably. I think that I think the floor's better with Goff. I don't know if the ceiling's any different though. Yeah,
that's a good point. I'm with you that I never play Kupp over Woods.
Yeah, and Kupp has had a couple big games, but he only had 3 touchdowns all year, and he was 10.6 yards per catch. He wasn't super effective all year.
No, yeah, I think Woods is the guy. I think I will probably. I can't believe I'm saying this. I think I'd probably look at T.Y. Hilton before these guys, just given the fact the matchup's better and
you think that if you think they're trailing, like it's in a higher scoring game, I mean, I think that makes sense. He only has 10 catches the last 3 weeks. It was just kind of weird. I thought he was doing a little bit better than that. He scored in 4 last games, it helps. But the only problem here is Tre'Davious White might be on him a ton, and he doesn't do a lot against Tre'Davious White historically.
Not many do.
Not many do. That's not a T.Y. Hilton critique. It's more of a Tre'Davious White's really damn good.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I'm just avoiding all of them, in this range.
Got to play 3 though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean, we get to John Brown, and yeah, I think especially if Beasley doesn't play. If Beasley doesn't play, John Brown is going to be really popular.
Yeah, he's 4,700 on DraftKings, and he played 30 snaps last week. His first game back, 4 for 72. Had the nice touchdown catch. Touchdown. Last 3 games he played, 99, 72, and 72 yards on 18 catches. When he plays, he's very involved, very active, and makes a really nice option against Diggs, who's obviously going to get a ton of attention.
Yeah.
They can't do anything but single cover John Brown the whole game.
Right, yeah. Simple as that. I think he's fine even if Beasley plays. I think.
Yeah, because I think they're an outside versus a slot guy. I think he could still be fine.
Yeah, it's more like, do you play Beasley if he plays?
To me, it's if Beasley doesn't play, do you play Isaiah McKenzie?
How much is he?
3,300. Oh man! And obviously, everyone's like, "Oh, he scored twice. He scored 3 times. He had a punt return too. He scored 3 times. Whatever, it's one thing. But if Beasley doesn't play, McKenzie's the slot guy, and he had 9 targets last week on 58 snaps. It's very clear that he was the slot guy, and you don't expect the touchdowns, all that kind of stuff. But you expect some targets and some work if Beasley does not play.
I was scrolling through. I'm still bitter about Gabriel Davis's bailout touchdown last week.
Oh, it was garbage. I don't even know why they were still throwing the ball at that point.
Oh, so many donkeys getting away with it. Yeah, I think McKenzie makes a ton of sense.
It has to be Beasley not being inactive fully, but yeah, of course. I think. Is there anybody else down here cheaper you like? I looked at Cam Sims and Zach Pascal, and nobody's really firing me up. I think it's for me, it's the Buffalo guys. Brown at 4,700, McKenzie maybe at 3,300, but. I don't know. I mean, I guess Pascal, if you think that Indy's trailing and he's been more involved than Michael Pittman the last few weeks, but he played 61 and 56 snaps the last 2 weeks, but nobody really excited me down here.
I was going to say the problem with the Colts is the run backs, if you want to do that with Buffalo, is just not that. These guys, they're all just guys.
Yeah, they are. And you're hoping for you're going to find the guy that gets the touchdown late and that kind of thing. But, Cam Sims had 22 targets the last 3 weeks, had 13 catches. Plays a lot of snaps, good game script, so I think maybe you get away with that at 3,900 if you don't want to play McLaurin and want someone in that game that kind of come back in the second half. But they're all kind of leaps of faith down here.
Do you play Brown over Beasley if Beasley's in?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. Just because I don't think Beasley's going to be 100% if he plays. And stupid that he was in, by the way. They were way up in that game, week 16. Everybody's like, why is Josh Allen still in? And then Beasley got hurt. I'm like, well... There you go. Everybody on Twitter wanted something bad to happen because they were running it up, and there it was. And I think I play Brown first.
Okay. Agreed.
Real quick on tight ends. I think tight ends this week on this slate comes down to Logan Thomas at 4,900 or Gronk at 3,900. And then if you want to go super cheap, there's some options out here. But I think it comes down, you have to figure out whether you want to play Logan Thomas at 4,900. He's way higher price than everybody else.
Yep. There are plenty of values. I mean, we were just touching on a bunch of them that like paying up for tight end this week isn't that bad.
You're still under 5,000. So
right. And the defenses are pretty cheap.
Yeah.
So, I think you're right. Thomas and Gronk is where everyone's going to go. Gronk, I think, will be more popular if Evans doesn't play.
Gronk's catches the last 4 weeks, 1, 3, 2, and 2. And he's always a factor in the red zone touchdown. But he has 3 or fewer catches in 7 of the last 8 games. He has been not involved except for 1 game since Antonio Brown arrived.
He had 3 touchdowns in those 4 games, though.
Yeah. I hope everybody plays Gronk.
Okay.
I do. I think Logan Thomas has double-digit PPR in 6 straight games. He's 1,000 more than Gronk, which helps. And people are being like, "Oh, I'll just pay 1,000 less for Rob Gronkowski on the team with the big implied total and Tom Brady and all that." I think Logan Thomas is a way better play.
What about Dawson Knox?
It's him and Higbee down here that I had highlighted to talk about. He's 32. Knox is 3,200. He's just. You have to get the touchdown, but it's a team that has the highest implied total. But he had 5 end zone targets this year, but. I don't know. He topped 50 yards once all year. I'd go to Higbee first, I think.
Okay. And
I don't love the fact that him and Everett essentially split targets. They each have 17 the last 4 weeks, but Higbee's the bigger play guy. He's 176 yards and a touchdown in those 4 games, and Everett has 70 yards total. I'd play Higbee over Knox, but I get if you want to go to Knox and get a piece of that game and kind of stack him with Allen and Diggs too. I get that, but head to head, I'd rather have Higbee.
Okay, that makes sense.
Don't really love any of them. I think
right.
I think Logan Thomas is clearly the best tight end on this slate.
Does McLaurin affect that at all? McLaurin's going to play.
He's going to play.
Yeah.
If he played last week, he's going to play.
Yeah.
Let's jump into defense real quick. It's funny because the next slate has no defensive options. This one has a bunch. I liked Tampa Bay and Seattle the most, especially if Wolford plays. You're facing a rookie quarterback on the road. First playoff game, I get there's no fans, but that's still an intimidating situation, more than intimidating crowd. But they're only 2,700. That's where I kind of went right away. They have 10 sacks last 3 games. And Tampa against Washington, nice game script. Alex Smith throwing the ball a lot the second half is probably something you want to face. 14 sacks last 4 weeks. They forced 4 turnovers last 2 weeks. Those are the 2 that jumped out to me as the best plays on this slate.
Totally agree. I think it's as simple as that.
If you wanted to be different, because I think those 2 will be very popular, I think the different way to go is the Rams. 2,900 against Russell Wilson. I just think they have 17 sacks last 4 games. Wilson does like to take sacks. I think if you want to be different, that's the game that they could force him into some mistakes. It's Russell Wilson, so I never really want to play against him, and I like Seattle and Tampa more. But I think if you wanted to go lower percent, favor or underdog on the road, I think they're the ones that are going to put up some points with sacks and maybe get a big play off it.
I thought you were going to say Washington.
I figured you thought I was going to say Washington because I think they work too. If they can pressure Brady, we talked about Brady's not very good under pressure. There's actually stats that back that up. He is. I'm looking at it right now. He's 43.9% completion rate and 5.2 YPA under pressure.
Yeah, just ask Eli Manning how Tom Brady does under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Brady under pressure is totally different. If they rush the quarterback, they could force Brady some mistakes for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Let's jump into the second slate. I think it's got a lot more playable offensive guys. But first, a note from our sponsor, BetMGM. Sports bettors know that magic happens when you turn a hunch into action and apply the right amount of expertise. That's why BetMGM has teamed up with RotoWire to offer new BetMGM customers a free 6-month RotoWire subscription when they place their first bet. Register on the BetMGM app or website and use promo code ROTO, that's ROTO, to claim your free subscription. Once you make your first sports wager, you receive a season's length of RotoWire's unmatched sports insights. Find out why BetMGM is the king of sportsbooks by signing up and placing your first bet today. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Colorado, Indiana, New Jersey, Nevada, Tennessee, and West Virginia only. Can you please gamble responsibly? Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, Nevada. 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey and West Virginia. In Tennessee, call or text the red line at 800-889-9789. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help in Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Promotional offer not available in Nevada. So the second slate here, we got 3 games on Sunday also. We start in the morning. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I have Twitter open here as we go. On this date in 2011, Marshawn Lynch erupts for a 67-yard rushing touchdown that helped the 7-9 Seahawks win the wild card playoff game against the Saints.
I was not making up stats for once.
There you go.
Beastquake.
That's right.
That game was crazy.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect. So the Sunday slate, we got 3 games. It's weird. The highest scoring game also is the 10 a.m. game, 1 o'clock on the East Coast. Baltimore at Tennessee is I think pretty clearly the most interesting and fascinating matchup this whole weekend. Baltimore is favored on the road by 3.5 points, even though that Tennessee beat them in the playoffs last year. Over-under is 54.5 in this game. Baltimore implied totals around 29. Tennessee's around 26. So Baltimore is the highest on the slate. Tennessee is like the 4th highest, but right behind Pittsburgh. Tennessee smoked them in the playoffs last year. They were pretty dominant in that game. They jumped out early. They beat up Lamar Jackson pretty well. Baltimore's won 5 in a row. Seems to be hitting their stride. This is a really fun and interesting game.
Tennessee's implied total is almost the same as Tampa Bay's.
Yeah, it's crazy. You compare the 2 slates and like there's 4 teams that are almost as high. It's just right. It's a much better offensive slate for sure.
Yeah. Am I getting too caught up in what they've done recently to think that the Titans win this game?
No, I don't. 3.5 point spread on the road seems crazy to me.
Seems like a lot.
I feel like I'm missing something here. Like I think Tennessee's pretty darn good, plays them well. I think they beat them in overtime in the regular season. Is that what it was?
Yep.
I think the spread should be bad. I think Baltimore's probably a better overall team when you look at it, but the spread feels like it should be even to me, not minus 3.5.
I will completely admit that I do not watch a ton of Ravens games because I like watching good football instead of this ugly stuff they play. But it seems like it should be higher than this.
And they're really good. I just happen to think that Tennessee, especially at home, is really good too.
Right. It's a weird one to me.
Fun game though. There's a lot of guys to play in fantasy. There's a lot. It's an interesting game just from a football perspective. What are they going to do with Derrick Henry? I mean, you got a guy that had 2,000 yards rushing. Derrick Henry led the NFL in carries, rush yards, and rushing touchdowns for back-to-back seasons. Like, wow. It doesn't happen with running backs. Like, running backs like have huge years and then kind of dip down a little bit. He's just been dominant 2 years in a row. Then we get to the 1 o'clock game, which is a 10-point spread. The Saints over the Bears. Over under there is 47.5. New Orleans implied total is actually almost as high as Baltimore's. It's 28.25. Chicago's implied total is 18.75. Weird game. Like you got probably the best team in the NFC playing this week. Green Bay's obviously off on the bye against Chicago, who kind of snuck into the playoffs and didn't really look good last week against Green Bay with Mitch Trubisky. Clearly, it appears to be the most lopsided game, and the fact that Washington at 7-9 is not the biggest underdog of the weekend is pretty wild.
Do you think, ignoring that, although it kind of plays into it, do you think Washington has a better chance of beating the Tampa Bay than Chicago does against the Saints?
That's a really good question. I think I do. I think I can find a path for Washington to win easier than I can Chicago.
Really?
So I think the path is that Washington's defense just balls out and hits Brady, and he's a mess, and they win kind of a close, ugly game. The problem with Chicago is New Orleans' offense is good, and their defense is really good. So it's just it's a hard way to see. I don't know. With Camara playing, with Michael Thomas back, I have Washington. I think Washington's a better path. I don't think either one has a good path, but if you made me pick one of them on the money line, I'd take Washington.
Okay.
It sounds like you go Chicago.
I think it's more that I could see Sean Payton trying to outsmart himself.
Well, why could you see that? He only does it every single week.
And not that the Bears are a fantastic team. They're defensively very good. I don't know. I think I would be less surprised if Chicago won than if Washington football team won.
I think that's fair. I'd go the other way. I think you get an ugly game, but it makes sense. Then the last game of the day, we've got Cleveland at Pittsburgh, who just played last week. Pittsburgh obviously is going to use their starters in this game, I'm assuming.
The Browns might not.
Yeah, I know. The Pittsburgh's favored by 6, over under 47. Pittsburgh implied total is 26.75. Cleveland's 20.75. Obviously the big news here is the COVID stuff. Kevin Stefanski's not going to be coaching. He tested positive. They're missing their starting guard, and Cleveland's offensive line has kind of been what they've leaned on all year. The thing with Cleveland is they're not practicing all week either. Like they just played Pittsburgh last week, which helps in game planning and installing stuff, but they're not in the facility. That today, I haven't seen if they opened it today or not, but yesterday it was not open. Wednesday was not open. The Steelers have Joe Hayden on the COVID list. He's not going to play either, but at least they're in the facility and practicing and playing. But The Steelers are 14-0 in Pittsburgh under Mike Tomlin against the Browns. They have never lost to them in this building with Tomlin coaching. They won 38-7 in this building in Week 6. Different teams than they were in Week 6. Obviously, Pittsburgh had that stretch where they looked really bad, and the only time they haven't looked bad is that second half against the Indy when they looked awesome. This is a weird game, and the COVID stuff kind of even makes it weirder.
I mean, you know what they say, Scott? It's tough to beat a team 15 straight times.
15 straight times. I feel bad for the Browns. Like, this is like they haven't made the playoffs in 18 years, and now they can't even like practice. Like, it's kind of a bummer.
It is. I don't know how you like can comfortably play any of them. Like, it's as simple as that.
You're
going to sell me on the Browns. Like, I'm sure you're going to sell me on Nick Chubb.
I'm going to sell you on Nick Chubb. Yeah, I mean, the Nick Chubb stuff is coming, but yeah, it's. I'm not playing anyone for their passing game. Maybe a cheap receiver or something like that, but it's too bad because the Cleveland's had a good year, a fun year. It's hard to like. It's a playoff game and you haven't practiced for a week. Like, it's just a tough situation.
Do you think they would have felt differently had they not just played?
Yeah, I think that probably helps them because they like literally just set up a game plan. But like, it's a completely different Steelers team they're playing. Like, they were sitting guys and there was no Ben and like Mason Rudolph sucks and like there's just like I don't know. It helps, but it doesn't help as much as it would if it was like a regular game where everybody played and they had a full game plan. But I think it just sucks. Like, I just wish it didn't happen. You don't want it to happen in the playoffs. And hopefully they don't get any more positive tests. Like, that's the real story here is like we're not done with Cleveland guys testing, so we don't know what's going to happen here. And I just hope they get everybody else going. At least can give it a good shot at this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's jump into the slate. There's a lot of guys to talk about. Running back is completely different than we have on the other slate. We've got two guys at 8,500 or higher. We have Derrick Henry. We talked about his accolades earlier. 9,200 on DraftKings. Alvin Kamara tweeted yesterday, "I'll see you on Sunday." There's a lot of talk about if the Saints had played on Saturday, he would have been eligible to play, and magically they got the Sunday game, which I don't know how that happened. It's amazing how that worked out that way. Yeah, if it was the Niners, they would have had him play Friday.
Yeah.
Sorry, still bitter.
Broncos fans are wondering why you're bitter.
Right, exactly, totally true. Kamara's 8,500. Obviously, he's tweeted he's playing. There's no way for us to know how like physically fit he is coming off COVID. We don't know what his symptoms were, if they were any at all. Like, he could be totally fine, or he could be like having trouble breathing by the end of the first quarter. Like, it's just hard for us to know. I think that factor makes Henry probably a lot higher owned.
Even though they're underdogs?
Even though they're underdogs.
Have you tried to get both of them?
It's hard. You can do it. I'm trying to remember. I did it, and I'm trying to remember who I played at quarterback. I guess you're gonna have to go Breeze or Trubisky, or you go Ben too. Like, there's a lot of options. There's more options on this slate to get cheap. Other places you can do it, and there's no digs on this slate, so like the receivers are cheaper too. Like, everybody's 7,000 or below. Yeah, it's doable. It looks a little ugly, and you can't play Lamar, but it's doable. You got to go. You probably have to go Connor or Hunt maybe as you go that your third, or you go cheap receiver, but. It's doable, but it's tough.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a very different situation than the Saturday one, just running back wise, like you said, which makes like actual construction significantly different.
It is. It's a lot harder to get everything you want in this slate because there's so many better players.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of people who just jam them in, though.
You think so? Yeah. I think you're probably right. Now that you said that, and I kind of scrolled down to the receivers. Yeah, I mean, like, you could. It's funny. We'd talk to the receivers last week, like, like only T.Y. Hilton's in this range that you could even play. And like on this slate, you've got Corey Davis, you got Marquise Brown, you got Chase Claypool, you got Juju. Like, there's a whole bunch of like guys you could talk yourself into pretty easily that are good in the $5,500 or lower range. And you're right. There's a lot of other ways to get around it. You're probably right. There's probably gonna be a lot of people that jam both.
Yeah, I think it's just as simple as like looking at the 2v2s where you're like, yes, not to like skip ahead to wide receiver, but like, yes, I would like to play Allen Robinson or Michael Thomas or AJ Brown, but it's like, do I want to play them so that instead of playing Camara, I have to play Gus Edwards? And you're like,
Michael Thomas still hasn't scored this year.
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah, I don't want to play Gus Edwards either. But like the fascinating fact of this is like you jump down to running back though. There's three guys that are interesting in the 6,000s. Like, yeah, we had nobody to talk about in the other slate. We had Jonathan Taylor, and then we went down to Chris Carson.
Yeah,
we've got three
and
guys.
I skipped him.
Yeah, you love Chris Carson. there's three guys in the 6,000 I think are very playable and really interesting. I mean, Nick Chubb, who everybody knows I love, David Montgomery, who's been awesome lately. He's 6,900, and J.K. Dobbins is 6,600. It has a huge week last week. Like, all three of these guys are better than anybody else on that other slate besides Jonathan Taylor. We've got 5 running backs on the slate where we had one that was really good in the other slate. Like, it's wild. And that one was a 7-point underdog too. Like, yeah, it's crazy how different the running backs are from slate 1 to slate 2.
It's been like 6 weeks in a row where after Dobbins' game, you're just like, why has this not been happening every single game?
And we talked about in preseason. I love J.K. Dobbins, and I'm frustrated that it hasn't happened every game. And he still has only more than 15 touches in 2 games. Like, he's so damn good, and with Lamar there, like, the opportunity for him to go off is it's there on every play. It's crazy how the big play potential every time he touches the ball.
Yeah, totally. Do you think Chubb is more popular than Montgomery?
No, I think Montgomery's a little more popular, but I think they're probably pretty close.
But they're probably behind Henry, Camara, and maybe Dobbins?
I think they're behind Henry and Camara. I think Chubb, Montgomery, Dobbins are probably pretty close, all three of them.
Okay. Like, Dobbins blindly is the starting running back for a favored team.
Yeah, and
that loves to run the ball.
13 for 160 and 2 touchdowns last week, and you got to think that if it's a close game, like, they're not gonna pull back on him now. I mean, there's it's a playoff game, like, they can go full go. The only thing with Dobbins is nothing in the pass game. He has 2 targets the last 5 weeks. Like, they do not throw him the ball at all. In a PPR setup, that matters. The interesting thing with me with Montgomery that I think is really interesting this week is last week they were trailing Green Bay. And you're like, oh, I wonder what they look like trailing, because they've been leading like the last 5 weeks. They've been running the ball. He had 9 targets last week.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is the most interesting to take away from that entire game is the fact that they were trailing and now they're big underdogs in the game. And it's really positive to me that they used him so much in the passing game. I think that was a huge factor to me looking at playing him this week. Because I think if they hadn't used him last week, I'd be like, if they're trailing, I don't know what they do with Montgomery. Because they like to feed him in the running game, obviously. But I think they're at the point of their season where they figure out they need to put the ball in his hands however the game is working out.
I agree with you. I think
he's faced terrible defense. We talked about that a lot. This defense is way better, but I think that's a big factor that he had 9 targets last week.
Yeah. I think that's what separates him with Chubb. Like, the fact that Chubb, and I think I said it, 17 weeks that, like, you always have to think about Kareem Hunt, like, possibly taking some stuff, and then Chubb goes 19 for 135 and 2 touchdowns, and it doesn't matter. But
Chubb, I love Chubb.
Yeah. I think you're more likely to get more out of the Bears offense through Montgomery than you are out of the Browns defense. The Browns offense with Chubb. Like, I think higher of the Bears than the Browns on this slate.
Due to the COVID stuff and not practicing?
Yeah.
Is that
yeah. And defensively, they're obviously both very tough matchups, but I'm literally picturing Chubb's 80-yard touchdown that he's going to have now to just shut me up. But
when we talked for 17 weeks, you know how much I love Nick Chubb, and I agree with you. I think that it's just hard. He's got to bust one to work. Like, it's a tough game script. They haven't practiced all week. They're missing one of their starting offensive linemen. Like, it just Pittsburgh allows 3.9 yards per carry. You can kind of go down all the list of the anti-Chubb. It's just he's super talented, so can break one at a time. That's always in play. But I actually think I like Montgomery and Dobbins more this week now that we've really talked.
Which
is hard for me to admit publicly.
Chubb is almost impossible with Henry and Camara.
Yeah, I don't think you can get a third one in there.
Henry, Camara, Dobbins. Actually, I guess he's only $100 different.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing.
I think if you look at, I wish you could play Camara as a wide receiver. I'll put it that way.
I think there's going to be. It's funny because you asked me earlier about Henry, Camara, and I was like, I don't think that many people slam it in. I think the fact there's 3 guys underneath makes me think that a lot of people are going to play Henry or Camara, and then one of these 3 guys.
Right. Playing Henry and Dobbins together seems. I mean, it's the same game. Right. But it's 2 teams that love to run the football, so who cares?
I was going to say, it's 2 teams. Yeah, there's no doubt. If the Titans are losing, Henry's still going to touch the ball 20 times. Like, they just, unless they're down 32 nothing at halftime and whatever. I don't know how they get to 32. That was a weird number, but he's going to touch the ball a ton no matter how the game works out until they're at the point where they don't have a choice.
And the easiest leverage, if you want to stay in this game, is ignoring these two and just going to the passing game. Like 100%. Both. Tannehill, Brown, Davis with, Hollywood Brown back, or, like there are plenty of ways to go.
And that's the difference between the first slate we talked about Taylor. It's like, if I don't play him, I'm going to play Rivers and Hilton and Pascal. But like flipping to this one is easy. Like you want to play Tannehill, Brown, and Davis. Like that's fun and sexy too. Like this game just has everything. It's a great game.
Yep.
Jumping down cheaper at running back, there's only a couple of options. We hit 5 guys, so that's 5 of the teams right there. Pittsburgh throws it a lot. They're kind of the opposite of Cleveland and Tennessee and Baltimore. The Pittsburgh running game has been awful. They are last in the NFL with 60 rush yards per game since week 7. James Conner's 5,000. He's played over 40 snaps the last 2 weeks, done nothing with them. The targets are nice. He has 13 targets the last 2 weeks. Do you consider Conner at all this week?
No. I'm surprised you even brought him up, to be honest.
6.5 point favorite. In a game they could run the ball a bunch second half. I tried so hard to get there with Conner and talk myself into him, and I still couldn't do it. And I usually can talk myself into stuff. I'm crazy that way. I just couldn't do it. He just looks so bad. It doesn't look good.
I think I'm more likely to play Gus Edwards.
He's 4,400 and does get work.
I was going to say I was more likely to play Snell over Conner, but Edwards and Snell are 200 different. That I would just play Gus Edwards.
Sadly, I think Edwards has more upside.
Yeah.
You can bust a couple. I think Conner has a better floor because he can get more touches and the targets are there, but it's tough to get excited about anybody down here. Kareem Hunt's 4,800. Touches the last 4 weeks are 12, 10, 7, 11. He's getting phased out a little bit for Chubb. Yeah. It's kind of happened. Now, if you think they're trailing, Hunt's more the receiving guy than Chubb, but I find it hard to get fired up about Kareem Hunt, and I think I'm probably just scarred from playing him way too much earlier in the year.
I think he's a great GPP option just because we talked about 100 guys that we'd rather play. So, I think he's fine. I just don't see...
For 3 games, it's a really good running back slate.
Yeah.
We only have 6 teams, and 5 of them are really fun, good options.
Yeah. And we kind of hinted that the wide receiver pool is not really that great, that I think you're just going to see a lot of people paying up for 2 of the 3. Going below Dobbins, those are the 5. I think people will just take 2 or 3 from there and then just work their way from there.
I think that makes sense. So looking at quarterbacks, not a lot of expensive guys here. We had a couple. We had 3 guys over 600 last slate. The only one over 7,000 this week this slate is Lamar Jackson at Tennessee. We talked about Lamar a lot during the season. How it was kind of ugly early. He's really turned it on the last 4 weeks. He has 25 or more DraftKings points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He was over 80 rushing yards twice in the first 12 weeks. He's been over 80 rushing yards 4 of the last 5. It's been a clear change that they're like, you know what, our offense is better when you run the ball. Maybe they're trying to keep him healthy earlier. I don't know what it was, but it's very clear that they're letting him loose the last 5 weeks where they weren't the first 12 weeks. Only over 200 passing yards once in those last 5, but multiple touchdown passes 4 or 5. It's been the old Ravens offense the last 5 weeks.
I think he's going to be the guy that you really want to play that you don't.
Tennessee pass D is bad.
It is.
They don't really pass a lot. They allowed 36 touchdown passes, but I don't know how much that factors in with Lamar. They're gonna run plays, gonna hit that open guy when he's there, and they're gonna busted plays or they got 8 guys in the box, whatever it may be. I don't know if pure passing defense really is that key for breaking this.
It doesn't even matter. I think. Like I said, I think you're going to want to play him, and you're going to build.
The expensive running backs are going to just make it too tough?
I think so, unless you just really punt elsewhere at the wide receivers, basically. The difficulty with Jackson, obviously, is we were just saying the rushing floor is so high that it's not like you can try to get away with his receivers. I'm going to fade Jackson because I'll just get all the pass catchers, but when you're locking in, 4 for 46, I'm not sure you're getting much from those guys. You got to hope that they get in the end zone. So
if he rushes for 85 yards, it's so hard not see him at least be good. It's
right.
when you rush for 85 yards, that's 8.5 points off the bat. Like you start with that with a quarterback. Like it's tough to battle that.
Yeah.
So if you don't play him, who do you play then?
I think the next spot you go is just right down to Tannehill. Obviously, the matchup is extremely tough, and if you're going to play Henry hoping for a ceiling game, then you usually don't get a Tannehill ceiling game there. But like Roethlisberger's been so bad. They obviously throw a ton, so like I get it.
He weirdly looked so good in that second half against the Colts too. Like he was so bad in the first half, then he was 23-29. He had 243 yards and 3 touchdowns in the second half. It was the weirdest. That was the weirdest game for me of the whole NFL season. It's funny because I think I bet Pittsburgh, and I was like, oh, that game's over. And I like just shut, and I looked up, and I'm like, oh my God, they're coming back. And I was like, all of a sudden they just passed him. And
they passed him, yeah.
He was so bad in the first half of the game. You're like, I wonder if he's done. I wonder if he's hurt. And then all of a sudden he was MVP Ben in the second half. It was, I don't know if he figures something out. He obviously has awesome weapons too, which is huge. I mean, he could throw a 6-yard pass and it turns into 60. Like he has so many weapons that it's really interesting too. And he's 6,100. I think if I don't play Lamar, I might go to him. Like I think it's there. I think him and Tannehill are the answers. Like I don't trust Breeze right now either at 5,700.
He was the one I was wondering, like, can we trust him with Camara and Thomas back? They're at home. Obviously, the Bears defense is good.
A ton, yeah.
I actually kept going down. I was wondering.
You go down to Mitch?
Can you get away with Mitch?
I mean, game script is awesome for him throwing the ball, 45 times, right?
Yeah. Like if you don't play Montgomery because you're playing Henry, Dobbins, and Camara. Not that you need like access to the Bears offense. But I don't know. Mitch isn't crazy, is it? It's probably crazy.
Three touchdown games the last 6 weeks, I think. I don't think it's crazy. I think I'd play Ben over him, though.
Can we agree that you definitely play him over Mayfield?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take that little victory then.
I made my notes here. I noted 5 quarterbacks, and Mayfield was the one I didn't even know. Week of no practice at Pittsburgh. I'm not playing Baker.
One of the comments I saw yesterday about all the Browns' absences, and it was like guys who were out or, who were already on COVID list or were just coming back, blah, blah, blah. And the last one was Mayfield hasn't thrown a pass since Sunday. And I thought to myself, so? Like, this guy's a professional quarterback. Like,
I'm sure he's throwing passes somewhere. Like, I don't think his arm's going to be rusty.
Right. He just forgot how to play football because he hasn't thrown a pass since Sunday.
That's awesome. He's probably out there throwing to the kids in the neighborhood at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my son runs around the house pretending he's throwing. Like, I'm sure Mayfield.
I thought you were going to say pretending he's Baker Mayfield.
Oh, like, no.
What are you doing in that house?
No, he's doing tiptoes pretending he's Will Fuller V. Yeah.
Where'd you get Will Fuller V from? Oh, because he likes Fuller V. That's right.
Yeah.
I was like, Notre Dame, Houston? No. I was sure your son was a big Nick Mullins fan running around the house.
Yeah, right. More of a CJ Beathard, actually. But.
There you go.
Do you think Roethlisberger is more popular than Tannehill?
I think Tannehill's more popular.
Okay. I mean, they're close enough. They're closer than Tannehill is to Lamar.
Way closer. I think Lamar's way up here ownership-wise. I think the other 4 guys we mentioned are kind of interspersed below that. But I think Tannehill's the second highest. Ben's the third highest. But I think there's a pretty sizable difference between all of them and Lamar.
The only hesitation I have about Lamar being that high is, like, how do you get there?
I just think a lot of people will start there and then figure out a way around it. Yeah, I just think everybody's going to look at this slate and be like, oh, I want Lamar, and figure out around it. And maybe, I guess you probably it's hard. You can obviously only play one of Henry and Camara, obviously, and then you probably have to jump down to Connor or someone like that, or you just go really cheap receivers too. I mean, there's past there, but I think people are going to see Lamar at the top and just slot him in pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
But you're right. It's a slate where it's a lot harder to fit all the guys you want to play. That first slate we were more like game theory and kind of figure out who you want to play against other guys, but you could almost get everybody in you wanted to in that slate. Like you can't play Allen, Taylor, and Diggs maybe, but you could play almost everybody you want that first slate. This one, like, you have to figure out ways to get under the cap, which, by the way, is way more fun to me.
Sure.
Receivers. We don't have that. Like I mentioned before, we don't have that Diggs at really high price. We got AJ Brown at 7,000, Allen Robbins 6,500, the clear like top 2 guys. Brown, I guess, depends on whether you play Henry or not. Like it's just tough to play both of them in this offense with the prices. AJ Brown was a man last week, hooked us up big time. We played him, or at least I played him in DraftKings.
We did not play him.
I played him. I loved AJ Brown last week. 151 yards and a touchdown, 11 targets. His first double-digit target game, which is significant. That I can't believe he didn't get double-digit targets all year, but a lot of that's the fact they hand the ball to Derrick Henry so much. But AJ Brown played 14 games here, scored a touchdown in 10 of them. Just a really good player. It's just a matter of how this game works out.
Yeah, you played Brown, I played Henry, and
they both worked pretty well.
It worked, yeah.
And you still beat me because Henry was still way better.
I don't think no, he wasn't way better.
That's right. He's about 10 catches. Yeah, the PPR is big.
Yeah,
we play in a analyst league together in DraftKings. We put our best lineup in there. I thought you were a little bit ahead of me last week. I forget.
No, I didn't end up ahead of you. I don't think
that the Jalen Guyton 0. I don't think. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring that up publicly.
This is the cheapest Michael Thomas has been in a decade. I mean, he's not that old, but
he's 6,300. He hasn't played in 3 weeks. He was on IR. Last played in week 14. 0 touchdowns on the season. He was over 85 yards twice, both with Taysom Hill, which is the craziest part of the whole thing.
Of course it was.
I have no idea what to do with Michael Thomas. I hate to admit that on air publicly, but I really don't know. He could go out there and be 2 for 22 or have 11 catches. And I don't know what we're going to get from Thomas. And he's really hard to predict this week because we just don't know how really healthy he is. If they put him on IR just to get him healthy and he was not that badly injured, I just don't know. And it's a hard guy to figure this week.
I think the easy thing to do is just to pay it for Camara. We're used to having them be fairly closely priced, so you're just I'll just take Camara because I know. But 6,300 is cheap.
It is.
Granted, we just talked about spending up everywhere else, so
if he was 7,100, I'd be I'm just gonna cross him off and not deal with it. But 6,300, you have to at least consider it.
Yeah, I mean, we get some easy pivots from guys we think will be popular. If you're not gonna play Camara, you can play Thomas. And if you don't want to play Henry, you can play AJ Brown. Yep.
He's really hard to figure out this week, and I could see either extreme being really real possibilities, which is you don't get very often.
Yeah, I just from a cash perspective, you have to play Deontay Johnson over Thomas. They're $100 difference on DraftKings.
You always have to play Deontay Johnson,
right? I mean, anytime you can lock in, 65 yards on 17 targets, you might as well do it. So
6th in the NFL in targets, which is pretty wild, but 14th in catches, which is probably lays out to exactly what you just said.
Where was he in yards? 25th?
I don't think he was that high.
Of course not.
I have it. Yeah.
But yeah, I think obviously the people who are playing Henry, Dobbins, and Camara, or Henry.
Good God, he was 25th in yards.
Yeah, look at
That's
that.
a good call. Wow.
Henry and Camara basically take you out of all of these guys unless you're if you're only playing 2 running backs, let's say that, and it's Henry and Camara, you might be able to get away with one of the expensive ones. But otherwise, you're almost out on this whole group. You're saying you're going into this saying no. Corey Davis will be fine. He had 11 targets last week, and
that's playing no Lamar too.
Yes, that is correct.
So you're playing a cheap quarterback, and you still only get one of these guys.
Right. So you're fully going into this. I'm going to play Corey Davis instead of AJ Brown. I'm going to play Claypool instead of Johnson. And then you just keep scrolling and say, who can I get away with that's further down? And you say, wait a minute. I know Dez Bryant scores touchdowns. How many targets does he get? And then you realize those are the targets.
Yeah. Allen Robinson's also in this range. We talked about him a lot. We love Allen Robinson. He was quiet last week. A lot of Jair Alexander. He had 2 for 37 on 5 targets. He had 2 touchdowns against New Orleans in week 8, so he did well in this matchup already early this year. He has over 70 yards and 5 of 6. We talked about Allen Robinson a lot all year. He's got this really good floor, and the ceiling hasn't been there. A couple times he hit the ceiling, but not a ton of times. The targets were a bit up and down the last 6 weeks. I was a little surprised the targets were as consistent as I thought they were. I think when we talked about him, I kind of always think he gets peppered with targets, but he kind of really doesn't with Trubisky. He has some big target games, some quiet ones. But best receiver clearly on a team that is going to be, probably down in this game, 10-point underdogs. Game script wise, he makes a ton of sense because you got to figure he gets the ball a lot this week.
How surprised would you be if he was the highest scoring wide receiver on the slate?
Not that surprised.
Right? Like, it's not shocking.
No. Like, you could see 12 targets, 9 for 102 and 2 touchdowns pretty easily as they throw the ball the entire second half.
Right, and they lose 38-14.
You've got me looking at Deontay Johnson now. I can't believe he's 25th in yards. That's crazy. He had less yards than Cole Beasley and Corey Davis.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
I just don't think any of these guys are going to be all that popular just because the running backs are so expensive. Like, you don't have cheap running backs to even get away with. Like, you're taking backups.
Yeah.
Like, in order to play in order to play Brown and Robinson or Robinson and Thomas, you're playing like Benny Snell and Gus Edwards.
You're playing at least one of those really cheap running backs that we didn't really like any of them.
Right. So I think the conversation is more like, which of the cheaper guys do you think can get 80% of the expensive guys and let you get away with it?
And there's a lot of them down here. There's Corey Davis at 4,800, Marquise Brown's 5,400, Chase Claypool's 5,200, Juju Smith's 5,500, Jarvis Landry, no thank you, is 5,800. Emmanuel Sanders, probably not with Thomas back and Camara back's 5,000. I have a guy in this range I really, really, really like this week. I'm not even sure why, but I really like him. But who do you have preferences in this range?
I think Davis will be really popular.
I do too at the price.
And I think
in the highest scoring game, yeah.
Right. Hollywood Brown, like, it's weird because I'm like, he's like GPP, like he can go off, but like he's very inconsistent. But like, the dude has double-digit fantasy points on DraftKings in 6 straight games.
He's become like weird, like touchdown scoring floor guy.
Yeah, exactly.
No sense.
Yeah. Brown at least theoretically gives you like access to Lamar because, the passing yards go there and they're more valuable for Brown. But I think a lot of people like what they saw with Claypool last week and end up there.
That's my guy. I love Chase Claypool this week. I think that he actually had a quote that said that they kind of pulled back on him. They didn't want him to hit the rookie wall, so they kind of pulled back on him a little bit midseason. And I mean, last week they unleashed him. 11 targets last week, 5 for 101. His average depth of target is 13.8 yards, which leads the Steelers. They obviously throw the ball short to Juju and Deontay. I just think he's the ceiling guy in this offense. I think that he has 25 targets last week. I think they're ramping him up as a big weapon right now. Cleveland struggles against the deep ball. They're better against short passes. I just think it lines up really well for Claypool to hit a couple of big plays this week. I love him at the price this week.
I think everybody will end up there. Is Juju going to play?
I think so. Questionable, but I think he's leaning towards he's going to play. But you talk about a guy like he has 97 catches and has 831 yards on the season.
Wow.
Like that is almost impossible. Like I'm scrolling here and looking at yards per catch, and in the top, look at the top 50. There is one other guy that's under 10 yards per catch. And then talking receiving yards.
This is Deontay Johnson?
It's Keenan Allen at 9.9. So 9.9, like barely cheating under 10. Juju's at 8.6.
Oof.
It's so far and away the worst yards per catch guy of any in the top 50 that it's unbelievable how different.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And Keenan Allen, like 9.9, he's right there. But like you look at where Deontay's 10.5, so he's pretty low. Claypool's 14.1. Like it bums me out that you said everybody's going to go there because I thought maybe he wasn't going to be that highly owned. But I love he's my favorite receiver play on this slate.
Okay, yeah. I mean, people are going to be loading up on this game. It's as simple as that.
You think so?
I mean, it has the highest total, no?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at Baltimore, Tennessee. Yeah. No, you're right. Absolutely right.
But you're right. You're right on the Pittsburgh offense.
Like, the Pittsburgh offense. That's right. Yes.
People are going to need access to this offense, and I'm afraid you're right on Claypool. I'm hoping they go to Deontay because he's been, the targeted guy all year. But I just think Claypool is too cheap this week.
I mean, just looking at like the Saints, I guess it's a 2-point difference in terms of implied total, but like the Saints' offensive weapons are so much more expensive than Pittsburgh's, and that's kind of ignoring the fact that you have no interest in the Pittsburgh running backs. So like it's really Do I want to pay $6,300 for Michael Thomas, $8,500 for Camara if you're basically looking at the pass catchers from the Saints?
And no one's going to the Sunday night game with no players, right? Like, you're going to want so I know it's stupid to think of it that way, but you're going to want someone in this offense for Pittsburgh, and you're going to want at least one guy in this game, and it's going to be, you're right, it's probably going to be more people than I want on Claypool.
I actually think that you should go into it with multiple players in this game, because if you're like way behind, and the expectation is that like everybody has Claypool, then you just go to Juju. Like, the pivots are easy.
Yeah, you can late swap to someone in this game. Right. Yeah, you're right. You probably go to Juju. He's going to be the lowest. Probably.
I mean, he's like, he's banged up. Deontay Johnson has all the targets, and Claypool is coming off that monster game.
You're going to end up late swapping to James Conner, aren't you?
Oh God. I'm going to go to Jarvis Landry.
You're like, I must be really far behind if I'm doing that.
Yeah, no, I'll go to Landry, and that's how far behind I'm going to be.
Among cheaper guys in the receiving range, there's a couple interesting guys here. The first guy I really like is Darnell Mooney, but he's questionable.
Thank you.
It scares me a little bit. He's got an ankle injury, but he had 11 targets last week, and the next gen stat,
11 catches.
13 targets. The next gen stats thing they do with like the depth of target thing, that little map they have. It was disgusting. They were like all like 2 yards from the line of scrimmage. Like, it was the weirdest. Like, this is a guy that like early in the year with Foles, they were using him as the deep guy.
Yeah, he was deep. Yeah.
With Trubisky, they're really using him as a short guy, but like, you give me that with Trubisky, I'll take it. Like, in a game, they're going to be trailing, throwing the ball a ton. Mitch is going to want the ball out of his hands. He has 25 targets the last 3 weeks, 19 catches. I think at 3,900, as long as he is okay to play, and he's questionable right now, like I said, he's been under 50 yards like 7 straight games for last week, so it's not a lot of yards, but in a PPR setting, he scored against New Orleans early in the year. If I'm going to go cheap down here, it's going to be with Mooney.
I think that's a great call. If you weren't bringing him up, I was.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be that hidden off the 13 targets last week, and a lot of people probably go there. But if you want no part of Cleveland, and I fully get that, do you consider Rashard Higgins at all at 4,100? Like, he's probably the one guy here where like he's so cheap that he has over 50 yards in his last 4 games. Should be a good game script. He was 255 last week after missing week 16 when the whole Cleveland wide receiver room was on the COVID list. If I had to go someone in the Cleveland pass game, it'd be Higgins, but I don't really think I want any of them.
That's how I'm looking at it. Like, there's nobody here I want.
Chase Claypool's going to be big this week.
Love
it. I think that's not everybody. The only thing I want to point out with Marquise Brown, like we talked about how good he's been the last 6 weeks in PPR scoring. He's been over 50 yards once the last 5 weeks. Like, it's been so touchdown dependent that I definitely prefer Claypool.
Why not both?
You could go both, and you might have to if you go big running back.
Yeah.
You might have to go Mooney, Claypool, and Marquise Brown or Corey Davis. Like, there's a lot of ways. This thing's fun because there's just a lot of different ways to go. I think the other slate, like there's just fewer paths to get where you need to be. Whereas this slate, you can make arguments like so many different directions.
Yeah, like we were talking about when you look at the prices on DraftKings for the running backs, those 5 that we were talking about, Dobbins is the cheapest at 6,600. That's that would be the second highest wide receiver price.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's wild too. Yeah, it's a slate you go different directions. You don't really get in a 3-game slate very often, so I think it's really fun. Real quick, tight ends. I think that the key here is what you want to do. You either go with Mark Andrews or you save money, I think is kind of what it turns out to be. Mark Andrews has been really good lately. 4+ catches in 6 straight games as Lamar's broken out. Tennessee's been poor against tight ends all year long. He has 29 targets the last 4 weeks. He has over 65 yards in 3 of 4. I think you either play him or you go way down in the 3,000 range was my read on the tight ends at least.
Yeah, the Austin Hooper stuff is odd because he's obviously like completely taken advantage of the fact that they've had no receivers at all.
Yeah.
But when you consider that he's going to be trying to catch passes from a guy who hasn't thrown a football since last Sunday, I just don't know how confident you can be.
His only game over 60 yards all year was the game where they had 0 running wide receivers on the team. Like
wasn't it on like 15 targets too? Like
I think it was. It was like it was 15 targets, 7 for 71. I think. Yeah.
Go Jets.
Good work, Jets. They won that game though. Come
on. Jared Cook seems like nobody will play him.
Nobody's going to play him because he's only $600 less than Andrews. So yeah, if you want to get complete low percentage, and Jared Cook led the Saints in touchdown receptions.
Why not?
Yeah, I want that. I want that prop preseason.
Why should I not play Jimmy Graham?
God,
I'm just kidding. There's no way I'm playing Jimmy Graham. It's more, do you think people play Komet or Jonnu Smith?
I think those are the two down here. Those are the two that I had bolded down here. I prefer Komet. I know the touchdowns haven't been there. It's been very frustrating because Jimmy Graham.
Because
Jimmy
they've been
Graham
going to Graham.
7 games. The last 7 games, Komet's kind of been more the guy. Jimmy Graham has 5 end zone targets, and Komet has 0. Like, what are you doing? But
does he have 5 touchdowns?
No,
3.
he gets 5 touchdown targets. Yeah,
3 touchdowns.
Yeah, Komet had 8 targets last week. He has 14 targets the last 2 weeks. He hasn't done much with them, but I don't know. Good game script. They're gonna be trailing and throwing the ball short the whole game. Like, you give me 8 targets at 3,000, I'd probably take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're probably not getting 8 targets for Jonnu.
I feel like people like Jonnu Smith more than what he actually does.
I completely agree with you. I think it's because he makes these really athletically difficult plays.
I think you're right.
And so he looks like somebody that you're like, that guy should get the ball a lot.
He does.
And he doesn't. But it's like it's a fundamental like should happen versus does happen, and people are like, he should get the ball a lot. I'm going to play that guy. And
he hasn't topped 60 yards since week 3.
I'm surprised it happened at all this season.
He had 12 targets in week 15 and 16, so there was like a moment there where they getting the ball a lot. But I mean, the problem is they have an all-world stud receiver, and they have another receiver they like to throw the ball to who happens to drop the ball a lot. But Corey Davis still has a lot of good plays, and they got Derrick Henry. Like, it's just you can only do so much in that offense that is just. I play Komet over Jonnu this week, and I'm not necessarily saying I love Komet, but I'll take the targets at any point.
I mean, these guys are all. I mean, we're talking about $3,000 tight ends, so you can't really expect much. But
are you going to try it? Are you going to try and force Andrews in, or you don't think you won't have the money with all the running backs we've talked about?
No, forcing in a tight end whose ceiling is like 80 yards and a touchdown just doesn't seem worth it for me.
Do you think all the other plays make Andrews really, really low percentage?
I don't know, really, really low, but I don't think. I mean, realistically, the Ravens stack. He's the first, obviously after Lamar. Like, he's the receiver you go to.
Right.
So, like, I don't think he's for tournaments. I don't think he's going to be that low, only because I think people are going to be focusing on the Ravens. But like cash games, I just don't see why you prioritize that. Like, I'm not even sure you play. Like, if he was a wide receiver, I'm not sure you would play him then.
He's so much harder to get in than Logan Thomas is on the other side. Is pretty wild. Yeah. Defenses this week on this slate. It's funny. On the other slate, I was like, I could argue for 5 of these 6 defenses. I only think 2 of the 6 are playable on this slate. I mean, if you want to save money, you save money. But Saints and Steelers are pretty far and away the 2 best defenses on the slate.
I agree, but I also don't think any of them matter. Literally none. I think you can make a case, except maybe the Browns. I think you can make a case for any of them, and it's just, if it's the Titans, it's because they're the cheapest. And at 2,200, given the variance, and we've seen the Titans defense have some decent games.
And we might need the money too. I mean, it's a slate where you're gonna you're paying, if you go 2,200 to 3,600 for the Steelers or 3,800 for the Saints, you're paying down somewhere else, so it's gonna actually hurt your lineup. So it's it depends on your build, but those 2 defenses really stick out. But you're right, there's the other ones are in play just because the price matters this week.
Right, like if you're looking at a 2v2 of Chase Claypool and the Titans defense, or the Saints defense and Rashard Higgins, where are you going?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to risk it with the defense at that point and play Chase.
I mean, the variance is just so high.
I'd play Chase Claypool with the Oklahoma Sooners defense this week. I would do anything to get Chase Claypool in this week.
Yeah, but I think that's what I always think defense is the last one you should build with. Either you start with defense and you take the cheapest one and you build from there, or you build the rest of your lineup and see which defense fits. And if you are going in and you're like, no, I want to spend 1,000, or is it 1,300 more, 1,400 more,
yep,
for the Steelers, wherever you find that money you're hurting the rest of your lineup.
That's it. It's a really good point for this slate. You just there's so many ways to spend up that just doing it on defense doesn't seem to make sense.
Right. Exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's
like normally we have situations where it's like Joe Flacco's under center against you play the defense there, but like this is the playoffs. We're generally have.
And we have those situations, those two games, but they're expensive. I mean, Trubisky on the road trailing is a good formula. Baker on the road trailing is a pretty good formula. But you're right, they're 3,800, 3,600. It's you got to pay for them, and I hate to take away the money from somewhere else.
And if they happen to just be so off on their throws that they don't even have interception opportunities, or then they don't fumble, like it's possible that it's a dominant defensive game. They give up 13 points and 7
DraftKings points.
Yeah, and it's just not worth it.
There's a lot of times you're like, oh, there's all this stuff, and you're like, oh, 6 points. You're like, oh, that's
right.
Good.
Right.
So it's a fun one. This second slate is really fun. I really like this one.
Yeah, me too.
Anybody else that you want to talk about in the slate? Anybody else that is on your mind there?
I'm excited for this Chase Claypool explosion.
It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be fun. Thanks everybody for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. The DFS version. Thanks for listening all year. Obviously, this is the playoffs. We're going to be with you for the divisional round, the championship round, and the Super Bowl too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or we're doing a one-game showdown?
You better believe it.
Cool. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you want to follow Andrew on Twitter, he's at RotoWire Andrew. I am at Scott Jenstad. If you have any questions for us as the slate kind of opens up and some injury news comes out, I think that it's going to be a lot less interesting in playoff time than it is normally. I think the guys are gonna play. Yep. But hit us up on there or follow stuff there. We'll definitely update some things there. Other than that, I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and I'll be back at you next week for the divisional round. Take care.